Thanks to Fiverr for sponsoring today's video. Should you start a garden in 2023? Of course you should. If you've got the opportunity to create your own space, grab it by both hands and go for it. Hello and a very warm welcome back to the garden. We're at our project site, Dan Ronen. It's also World Soil Day. Happy World Soil Day. And I'm sat in our perennial herb garden, which was created around 9 months ago. So whilst this video isn't going to be strictly a garden design video, I am going to be sharing 3 universal principles that's going to help ensure that your dream garden as a vision and as an idea in your head comes together and becomes a possibility for you to truly enjoy. The first principle is space. No space is created equal. Where I'm sat right now, surrounded by mud, is the foundations of a future garden. But the space is so important to understand for where you're creating a garden, because you can't just copy and paste a garden and think everything is going to work the exact same way. You can take inspiration, of course, but you've got to make sure that you design in relation to the challenges but also the opportunities that each individual space arises, and to also understand a little bit about climate. Now, I personally find talking about climate a little bit boring. I'm going to be putting some resources down below in the video description about that, but instead I want to talk about an acronym that I've created, the SWAGGER acronym. I've used it for a few years, and it's a very simple, clear acronym to understand how to very quickly get a grasp on the space that you want to turn into a garden. S stands for size. This is a really easy one. This is where you need to get a tape measure and measure up the space that you want to turn into a garden. Getting a tape measure out, measuring it up, jotting this down on paper, kind of like a bird's eye view, just to get a rough idea of dimensions, is going to act as your base plan to help make sure that when it comes to adding all of the bits in, that everything can fit nicely. If your space has boundaries such as trellises or walls, it's a good idea to measure the height of these, because vertical space is incredibly important if you have a smaller garden, because it allows you to maximize the amount of food that you can grow on the same foundation. W stands for water, and it needs no introduction as to why water is so important to think about, but often it's overlooked. When I came to look at this site, firstly, there was a running spring, and I thought, great, we got water. And then about a month later, it dried up. But fortunately, we knew we had a pond down in the corner, which was our plan B option in terms of getting water. Now, you might not have a spring or a water, you might be in quite an urban place. So one of the best things that you can do is look at places where you can get grey water. And another great place to look is roof space. It's incredible just how much water you can capture from rainfall off roof space, whether it's your garden shed, or perhaps you can readjust the guttering of your house to divert into a water tank. Think about how you can build up a little bit of security in terms of stored water for your garden. A stands for aspect. What is the garden facing? Is it facing a beautiful south-facing view and it's full of sun all day? Or is it a little bit darker? Or perhaps do you have a sunnier side and a much darker side? This is so crucial when it comes to planning, because sun is the most important part in terms of aspect, and you want to be able to prioritize different elements of the garden in relation to the light that it gets. So the sunniest side of the garden is really good for, say, your fruiting crops, but the shadier parts of the garden are going to be more suitable for your water storage or for compost making or growing leafy greens. If you are struggling for light, you need to look at things like the height of a fence. If you lowered the height of the fence, how much more light could that bring in? G stands for ground. What is the ground like for the prospective garden? If it's got loads of topsoil underneath, do you really need to build raised beds, for example? You've got to think about your needs in terms of what you want versus the reality of what's there. Perhaps you're renting, and so if you're renting, looking at things like containers versus raised beds is going to be far more favourable, because those are much easier to remove if you need to move later on down the line. And the second A stands for access, which is often another thing that's overlooked. if you have a back garden, but the only way to get there is through your house, you've got to think carefully about the types of material and how you bring that material into the garden. In the future garden where I'm sat in the middle, I had the opposite problem. I had super clear access from all three sides around, and I had to think more carefully about usual lines of travel in relation to other parts of this project site in terms of where to best place gates, and also how big should those gates be. And if you truly are starting from a blank canvas, then the best place to start is working out the boundaries, because from there you can start to work out the access and then bring in the rest of the swagger elements to ensure success. The area of this garden here is going to perfectly match a half-size allotment plot, and whilst the garden has been designed, the plantings are staying a top secret right now because of the nature of the project that it's involved with. However, I did task a Fiverr freelancer to create a quick 3D render mock-up so I could quickly get a snapshot of how the physical infrastructure of the garden would look. And I don't have the skills or the patience to do that myself, but sometimes getting a real simple 2D drawing into a reality that I can see is so helpful to bring a project to life. Seeing the 3D renders of the garden has really helped to solidify that I feel I've made a nice choice, and now it's time to bring that vision into reality. You too can get your garden concept created into a 3D render by a Fiverr freelancer, as well as countless other services, because Fiverr is my go-to online marketplace to find freelancers to help me solve certain problems that I'm up against, or to help with achieving certain projects whenever I reach a specific skills barrier. I personally have been using Fiverr for about 8 years, from things like logo design and animation to voiceover, and right now I'm also getting a narrator to narrate a 100-year-old super rare gardening book that's super fascinating, that's going to be a free bonus as a part of an online course that I've got coming out shortly. As time progresses, I'm continuously using more and more Fiverr freelancers to help with undertaking various projects, and I just like to have that peace of mind that there's someone out there who can help and that there's a freelancer that can suit any budget. The thing that I really value is whenever you're communicating to a freelancer about everything, you just chat to them directly and on a daily basis. It's just hassle-free communication, and that's something that I really value. So head to fiverr.co/garden2023 to check out the services available there to help you achieve what you need to achieve, and use the code GARDEN2023 for 10% off. Once you've gone out to your garden and you've got a really firm grasp about the swagger that it has to offer, and you also understand the climate context in which your garden is in, it's time to move on to that second principle. The second principle is on the beneficiaries. Who is going to benefit from the garden? Not just you, but in terms of nature and wildlife as well. Now, the most standard advice for anyone starting gardening is, if you're focusing on food, is to grow things that you enjoy eating. And if you're focusing on the ornamental side, is to grow things that you enjoy looking at. Because if you've got that passion behind it already, it's that passion and that curiosity to enjoy that for yourself in your own space that's going to drive you forward. If you're growing something just because you see other people growing it, but you're not particularly fussed by them. For example, tomatoes. Yes, I have come across people before who don't like tomatoes, but that's okay. You know, we all have our preferences. But just because you see someone grow it doesn't mean you should grow it. You need to prioritize the things that really bring you joy. And so sitting down and writing a list of kind of the dream plants, and then understanding what kind of environment that they grow in to see if they're suitable for you is a really good starting point. What I would recommend is, if you're, say, you've just got an allotment plot or you've got some friends that garden, ask them advice, especially people who are in your area. They'll be able to help with varieties of what to grow, for example. They'll be able to help with the best sowing times, for example. They'll be able to help with pest and disease control. Use local knowledge wherever possible to help gain a broad understanding behind what you can grow in your space. And as well as what you can grow, you need to know why are you growing it. A quick aside is to also make sure that you look at perhaps brushing up on time efficiency skills, because there's going to be certain times during the year where you just need to get a load of things done in order to gain from the benefits later in the season. So understanding ways such as prioritizing tasks, batching tasks, for example, understanding when you should maybe ask for help. All of these things are going to be a great collection of efficiency tools to ensure that the dream stays alive. One of my favorite things to tell people when they're creating their own space is to really try and get as much as they can possibly think of out of that space. Yes, as a primary existence, it's going to be a garden, but what other things can you add there that's going to act as an attraction to get you out there as often as possible? Perhaps you want to create a really nice cozy reading nook, or perhaps you love having an outdoor fire, so you get a fire pit, for example, or perhaps little table and chairs for you to enjoy breakfast on nice sunny mornings. Think of other little elements that you can bring to the garden to help form it around you, because I really think that a garden is an external portrayal of a person's personality, and you want to go into the garden and think, this is my space, it's singing to me, this is almost an extension of myself, and have a little bit of fun with this. And when you bring personality to your garden, you really start to see that no two gardens are created equal, and you're creating a truly special place for yourself and for all the other beneficiaries, which it might be important for you, because it's really important to me, is thinking about the local wildlife around me and how I can best support their populations. So there's many ways that you can approach this. There's things that you can do, for example, creating a really beautiful pollinator flower border, for example. Things such as a pond or solitary beehives, or looking at places where you can put up some bird boxes, is going to really be valued by nature. Now, once you've thought about and perhaps made some notes on who's going to benefit from the garden and how, it's time for principle number 3. The third principle is community. Design with local abundance in mind. Now, I'm going to tell you something you should have done about 6 months ago, but don't worry, because the second best time is now, and that's to start making your own compost. Even if you haven't put a garden design or plan together yet, just start making compost, even if it's in a pile in a corner. If it's your first time ever making compost, I've got a really simple, no fuss blog down below that's going to help get you started. The feeling of making your own compost and constantly becoming more self-sufficient in making your own compost it's just so powerful, because if you can make your own compost, that goes a long way. Now, how does this relate to community and designing with local abundance in mind? Well, it links in many ways, because what I mean by that is whenever you're creating a garden, what you need to do is look at what is actually out there. What is out there beyond the garden gate? How can you use your geographic location? Maybe you're in an urban area, or you're in a rural area, or suburban. What is there around you that can help both reduce the costs in creating your garden, but also to build resilience, because you know that you have access to those resources. You confidently know that they're going to be there for years to come. So most people will have access to loads of cardboard for years to come, for example. That's a great resource for us gardeners. If you live in a more coastal region, for example, this garden right here, the sea is less than a mile away. I have an abundance of seaweed virtually at my doorstep that I can use within this garden. Perhaps you live pretty close to an industrial estate. These are full of pallets that you can use, and pallets are a great, cheap or free building material building resource that you can do, whether it's making beds, whether it's making fences. So if you have access to loads of pallets, that's a really good cost saver for creating your garden. If you have access to loads of leaves, for example, that's something that you can collect either to bulk up your compost or to turn into leaf mold, which is a great peat-free alternative that you can make at home. An underappreciated skill when it comes to gardening is being able to think outside the box and seeing what is one person's trash is your treasure. And how can you treasure that in terms of your garden? And the thing that's nice about winter is it gives you the time to go out, to make connections, to find particular resources that are there and available for you, and to help use that to influence how you're going to approach your garden, not just in building, but how you're going to approach fertility management, creating your own compost, creating your own DIY amendments. Just embrace the things that are out there in your local area and how they can benefit you. And the good news is even though you adapt your garden to be more local focused, there's countless resources out there online that's going to help you make that possible. The way that I see it is that the more that you source for your garden from the local area, the more money that you're going to end up saving, and the more kind of satisfaction that you get from the process as well, knowing exactly the history behind every element that makes your garden. Those three principles, coupled with your curiosity and passion, is really all you need to create and start a vegetable garden. The rest is, yes, ironing out those fine details, but that forms a really strong foundation to ensure success from the space that you're going to create. So thank you very much for watching. Thanks again to Fiverr for sponsoring this video and supporting a lot of the projects that we do. Don't forget to go over to fiverr.co/garden2023 to see the services available to you and use code GARDEN2023 for 10% off. And watch this video next, how to become self-sufficient in compost. Compost is so good to help improve the quality of our soil, and it is World Soil Day after all.